blonde afro.
Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, the classic. This 2004 Rockstar Games masterclass is fondly remembered by many. As something of a confession though, as much as I've played chunks here and there over the years and understood the game in a very general sense, I've never given it a full, proper playthrough. So I thought I'd finally remedy that. Fire up San Andreas, the old original gangster version, not the peculiar remaster that has weird character models and a strange obsession with hiking the saturation and contrast, the 2004 edition of the game in all its painful glory, and finally commit to that playthrough and see what I've missed. Sure enough, my playthrough was a mixture of pure enjoyment, trivializing the in-game economy at my earliest convenience, and the unadulterated agony of contending with a control scheme Satan himself wishes he thought up. There's no denying that at approaching 22 years of age, San Andreas is now an aged game. In some areas, it's aged like the finest of wines, where you savor every sip. In others, it bears the burdens of time like a vintage dairy product. But is it still worth playing in the year of our Lord, 2026? Well, the time is upon us to dive in and find out. So grab yourselves a brew, some snacks, sit down, relax, as we dive headfirst into GTA San Andreas. A sensible place to begin would of course be the beginning. The year is 1992 and we play as Carl Johnson, returning home to Los Santos after 5 years in Liberty City. His mother was killed in a drive-by shooting. Amidst events in relation to a gang CJ has not represented in years, the Grove Street families, currently led by Carl's brother Sweet. Returning simply to bury his mother, Carl is very swiftly sucked back into the streets. Along the ride from the airport, he's accosted by the corrupt police officer Frank Tenpenny, voiced iconically by Samuel L. Jackson, and his personal yes-man, Pulaski. The cops coerce Carl into cooperating with them through threatening to implicate him in the murder of a police officer, and what that means is for the rest of the story to reveal. Once the cops rather violently shove us out the car, we're left to nick a bike and cycle back to Grove Street to reunite with the life Carl left behind. This is where we're introduced to key characters such as Big Smoke, Ryder, Sweet and Kendall, each of whom has a unique reaction to seeing Carl again. The opening is very much that of a prodigal son trope. We've returned, but we're not exactly welcomed back with open arms by all. Big Smoke and Kendall are happy to see us, but Sweet is more interested in showing us the misfortune of the Grove Street families in the 5 years since Carl abandoned the gang. As for Ryder, he's just kind of an asshole anyway. The opening is quite fast-paced, which is frankly odd for something so character-driven, but it expertly establishes the foundation of the narrative in as few scenes as possible. We're threatened with the looming presence of Frank Tenpenny, introducing immediate tension. We're immediately introduced to the emotional baggage that forced Carl to flee in the first place, and in the tapestry of character reactions to his return, the turbulence of street gang life. It's brutal and its pressures force people to react in different ways, and most importantly, not everybody survives. Hence, 75% of the reunions occur in a cemetery, so Sweet can point out our fallen comrades. It's a very obvious point, but what makes it intelligent is the narrative has to rely on this foundation. If you look for it, the opening is very openly communicating what to expect, before we're even thrust into any meaningful gameplay. Tenpenny services the implication of a grander conspiracy. Big Smoke is the apparently unchanged friend, who's just happy to see his long-lost buddy. Kendall is the symbol of familial love that tethers Carl to this story, and Sweet is the disapproving older brother, who blames and even resents Carl for past events. He's who we need to win over. As for Ryder, he's a symbol of hostility, a reminder that some people care to uphold the facade of friendship more than others. We're not given long to linger on that, as next we're introduced to the Grove Street family's rivals, the Ballers. We're forced to cycle away from them because Big Smoke's car got blown up while they chase and shoot at us, informing us that we have immediately been thrust into the middle of a violent turf war. The game isn't content to simply tell us about the Grove Street family's misfortune, it's now manifesting in an everyday threat breathing down our necks. As for where the story goes from this foundation, well, it takes a breather to introduce us to how the game plays, and I had a hard time getting to grips with the controls. They are mostly straightforward in hindsight, but it's a 2004 game ported to PC in 2005. Controller support? What is that? I'm primarily a PC gamer, but wherever possible, my preference is to have a controller. According to the game's Steam menu, it does not have controller support. However, I can report controllers do in fact work for this game. That being said, don't use one. The controls just aren't what you'd expect them to be, so you have to map it manually. Then there are far too many functions, including contextual ones for the sum of buttons you have. While there's room for some overlap, there isn't as much as you'd need. Finally, the game doesn't tell you directly what buttons have been mapped to what. The buttons are instead numbered, so keyboard and mouse is the path of least resistance. So I had no choice but to suck it up and hope I wasn't too rusty. Keyboard and mouse controls, though, they're actually okay. There are some strange choices among the default settings. For instance, entering vehicles, you press the enter key rather than F or E, which requires taking my hand off my mouse to do it. So I have to surrender directional control for a moment to get into a vehicle, or if I want to use the other hand, stop entirely dead for a second. Not wanting to interfere with the mapping out of fear that I'd only make things worse, I just decided to get used to it, and sure enough, I did. There are other funny functions, but for the time being, they're yet to come. There is one more thing I'd like to mention though before we go back to the stuff that matters, and that is the frame rate. You'll notice it's 30 FPS. Honestly, that's not something that occurred to the fore of my mind for the vast majority of the playthrough, but as I reached the back end, I did hit the setting that allowed it to be 60 frames per second, and I kicked myself for not playing the entire game at 60 frames per second, until I watched the very fabric of the game enter a technical nosedive, so we'll settle for a crisp 30. Anyway, the first few missions after watching the ballers force Big Smoke to do cardio are focused chiefly on getting our bearings. Ryder takes us to go and get a trim, introducing us to the customization element of this game, but he also lets us drive his clap box, and driving is a huge part of any Grand Theft Auto game. It is weird that there are so many instances of people having you drive their cars for them while they're in the passenger seat, but it just wouldn't be a GTA game if we weren't driving at every opportunity. Sure enough, it's also interesting just how well the driving in this game holds up. Throttle when driving is all or nothing. I thought it was a keyboard and mouse problem, but actually with controllers it's the same. Cars do handle as if anti-roll bars haven't been invented yet, so you're going to end up on your roof a few times, but generally speaking the controls are actually quite good. Braking and steering are responsive, handbrake turns are useful. Considering most missions will have you driving some description of vehicle, this is the area you would expect to hold up. That being said, the actual traffic AI is prone to going crazy. Object permanence is also fickle. If you look behind you, there's every chance something is going to spawn in front of you, so you do that at your own risk. Off of driving, the game is quick to introduce us to its life simulation features. First, we visit a barber and ask him to cut hair onto our head, which of course is part of this game's customization, which also includes changing clothes. The menu setup for this is actually quite slow and painful, but it altogether means Carl Johnson can change looks, and we can find an aesthetic that suits us. And that's Rockstar Games' first mistake here.
That is an American ready for action.
These customization features, along with getting tattoos, help grant the player a sense of ownership over the character. The line between Carl Johnson and the player is finer when we have input, however modest, on how Carl is presented within this world. At first, we're drip-fed that with a fresh trim. Then we're instructed to go to a nearby fast food restaurant and get some food. Carl needs to eat to survive, but it's very unlikely that you'll wear this mechanic down to the point where he drops dead. It's a simple meter that resets if you eat or save, and you're going to be doing at least one of those very regularly, so I guess it's just here as a reminder to look after the fella, which is fine. Eating food can also be a means to replenish health. Plus, not engaging with this at all would be missing an opportunity to watch Carl devour the food right in front of the chronically underpaid staff member who served him, because who doesn't want to assert dominance in a Burger King? Of course, there's a flip side to stuffing your face with burgers. CJ can become rather rotund. The solution to this, of course, is we need to pack on the muscle. So a lot of my early, I would say few hours, but it frankly didn't take me that long, was dedicated to absolutely smashing out the gym. Each workout can be completed by mashing whatever key or button the game tells you to, either spacebar or spacebar and left mouse, until the game starts telling you you're getting wham, and or the game stops you because you're going a bit nuts. At which point, just nip home and save and come back and you're good to go again. Of course, you can also train stamina, and this does have a stat benefit, increasing CJ's endurance, allowing you to sprint or swim, or indeed cycle for longer periods before getting fatigued. As for packing on the muscle by smashing the weights, this increases our melee damage for the whole maybe 5 situations where that's useful, one of which happens before we're even told about the gym, but still, the time sink is worth it to become Meathead Johnson, as you run around doing what are basically errands for the first few missions, or at least what will feel like errands come the end of your playthrough. The game is constantly directing you towards these life simulation features, embedding us in the routine of Carl's life as early as possible. It wants us to care about him, the characters around him, and the world he inhabits. It just so happens that process lines up with laying the groundwork for what's to come. Gameplay escalations are rarely sudden. San Andreas prefers to ease you into it. As such, many of the early missions aren't the most riveting in the game. So we need something to latch onto, and that just happens to be the world. Let's focus on Los Santos for now. An obvious parody of 1990s Los Angeles, it is by no means the most detailed environment Rockstar would ever make, but it communicates its purpose well. We play as a young man from an underfunded part of a parody version of Los Angeles, a series of districts dominated by street gangs, where the cops are portrayed as perhaps the biggest gangsters of the lot, so the community that Carl is a part of is on its own, decimated by desperate poverty with no protection whatsoever. These aren't characters inherently faced with options and the world has to communicate that. This is a reality brought about by systemic neglect, taking heavy inspiration from the hood film subgenre of gangster movies, and all of this fuels its satire. That chaos would go amiss if we didn't have a grounded protagonist to anchor to. In this respect, CJ is very much so the straight man trope that has become something of a staple in the GTA games. What this means is, in a world of intense, chaotic satire and even comedy, vocation aside, Carl is reasonably normal and composed. He acts as if the craziness is normal, without ever becoming the target of the satire. When surrounded by caricatures of irrational behaviour, unhinged and eccentric personalities, he's the well-rounded, pragmatic one, granting his position to observe the world versatility. He may go along with the increasingly absurd narrative, but his purpose is to be a filter for the audience. This is a deliberate technique to highlight the societal ridiculousness on display, in this case, the ridiculousness of 90s Southern Californian society. CJ being relatively reasonable allows him to react akin to how the player might. This makes the satire stronger, but also allows us to digest the information and take the storytelling seriously. It's important to remember that satire is not comedy. Being amusing is a byproduct. But more than a cheap laugh, it's angling towards a critical point. More generally, it's critical of American society, which is pretty much every GTA game in a nutshell. But this is also a critique on the criminal underworld and the trope of the noble outlaw. The Grove Street families are portrayed early as a self-destructive gang. Sweet is portrayed as a morally righteous leader who refuses to involve his gang in the crack cocaine epidemic. The problem being there are other gangs more than happy to push the drugs, resulting in the Grove Street families being left behind in the power struggle, and then the drugs get pushed anyway, but the Grove Street families can't profit. Carl Johnson returns after 5 years away to a gang lacking direction. They may have a stronghold in Grove Street, but the surrounding territory is occupied by rival factions, so it's up to Carl to try and claw back some control. But Sweet's narrow-minded, so our only means to wrestle back control isn't to further the gang's business interests, but to go killing ballers. To seize control of any given neighbourhood, we need to partake in a turf war. This consists of fighting off ballers until they give up. Doing so does give us momentary monetary gain, but the ballers will eventually come back in an attempt to reclaim their territory at a rate that's perhaps a bit too intense for the game to reasonably expect you to successfully fend them off all the time. And that right there is a gameplay portrayal of the vicious cycle of violence the Grove Street families are locked into. For the time being though, aside from an introductory mission, it's entirely optional content. The plot direction ensures that it doesn't matter, and that's not a quality thing, it's very intentional. Meanwhile, any other activities we partake in the early game are street-level odd jobs, basic raids, and petty crime. Or at least petty within the confines of the insanity of the GTA universe. The point is, we find ourselves seizing opportunities while other criminals are the ones creating them. We even dedicate time to spray painting, replacing the ballers' tags with our own. Unlike the Turf Wars, success here is permanent, meaning the ballers don't actually care that we're doing this. When all's said and done, it's a game mechanic, but I choose to view it as the ballers have evolved past it, whereas the Grove Street families under Sweet are not yet seeing the big picture. Nothing in my mind screams that more than a pointless collectible, and I mean that as a compliment. Sweet is a leader stuck in the past, in his romanticized view of the traditions he believes are his duty to uphold. That's why he takes such a dim view of CJ leaving after their brother's death 5 years prior to this game's events. It's also why he's disapproving of Kendall's love interest, Caesar, being the leader of what was formerly a rival gang. Carl doesn't take to the guy immediately either, but as it turns out, he's kinda sound. In fact, he's more than that. He even ideologically aligns with Sweet's no narcotics ideology. More importantly though, he proves himself to be a valuable ally. You'll see how in a moment. The point I'm trying to make for the time being though is Sweet is an unproductive, stubborn leader. Meanwhile, spend any time with Ryder and Big Smoke and it's apparent they're far more ambitious. The missions they send us on actually escalate. In hindsight, this is a clear indicator of this game's major looming plot twist. Sweet clings to the idea of loyalty to the Grove above all else, and that isn't as observed by the characters around him as he thinks it is. There is not that much room for morality. And Tenpenny, with whatever corrupt scheme he's running, is closer than Sweet realizes. Effectively, no matter how moral this gang is or isn't, they are still pawns in a bigger game. They're playing it whether they like it or not, and the game doesn't recognize ethics, only strength and weakness. And CJ has returned to a very weakened gang. Therefore, the romanticized struggle is an embellishment. No matter who's involved or what pick and mix of morals we subscribe to, the lives these characters occupy is a gritty, dirty business. The characters are still engaging in serious crime. We're carrying out murders and robberies left, right and centre, but selling drugs is where we draw the line? That is a flawed hill to die on. Especially when Sweet has no ambition to make a move forwards. Which is where I suppose Carl comes into this narrative. Much like Sweet, CJ also has a firm moral compass. It's just as contradictory. His mate's rhymes suck so bad he breaks into a famous rapper's mansion, kills all of his guards just to steal his rhyme book. He is by no means a model citizen, but he does at least come to feel bad about it eventually. And don't get me started on how he acquires a girlfriend by setting fire to a building that she happened to be in. All it takes is one daring rescue from a situation we caused and hot coffee. Anyway, now that we've established that Carl has his issues, as I was saying, he does exhibit moral character. He left after his brother Brian died, blaming himself, so we know he feels guilt and remorse. He also evidently places value on family and friendship. Perhaps a bit too much considering his vocation, much like Sweet. But unlike Sweet, CJ is forward-thinking. More importantly, he's used to looking beyond Grove Street. He's experienced 5 years of life away from it. So if anyone's going to bring the gang back to their height, it's him. Sure enough, that's what the opening act is dedicated to, reclaiming power by striking out against the ballers. But it doesn't necessarily feel that way, there's still a piece missing from the puzzle, the looming presence of Tenpenny and his goons. He seems perfectly comfortable showing up at Ryder and Big Smoke's house, but the main thing is we're yet to discern what he's up to. We gather he's a corrupt cop when he threatens CJ at the start of the game with framing him for the murder of a police officer in order to secure his cooperation, but his broader plan is yet to be revealed. In the first act, he leverages that coercion to force CJ to meet him in a donut shop, which, fair enough, where else are you going to meet a cop? Where he tells us to go kill a gang member because he's getting in his way. This is the mission that includes setting fire to a building, which works out for CJ because he ends up with a girlfriend who enjoys a bit of danger, loves to go dancing and carrying out drive-bys. Then the next time we see Tenpenny's mug, he sends us to interrupt a deal between the ballers and Russian arms dealers, where we have to kill the Russian arms dealer in question. Tenpenny's not just interfering with the gang infrastructure in Los Santos, he's actively sending us out to commit murders. The only thing that makes him different from us inhabiting the role of a gangbanger is that he's a cop. A dirty cop, after all. How many Rosas do you know with a personal hitman? But still a cop. That makes him untouchable, and he knows it. He unrepentantly acts above the gangs he's no better than. He abuses his badge to degrade Carl from the moment we meet him. He's callous and cruel. He's an easy man to hate because there isn't a solitary redeeming quality about him. In part, he's a commentary on the oppressive quality of policing, particularly when it comes to policing impoverished neighborhoods, where the gang activity symptoms of systemic failings have been perpetually treated as if it were the disease itself. He's brutal, ruthless, and self-serving, the caliber of man you wouldn't want to be a cop, yet the caliber of individual who all too often ends up as one. But he's not just a vague sociopath on a power trip. He and his crooked cop buddies are based on the Community Resources Against Street Hoodlums gang intelligence unit of the Los Angeles Police Department that was active between 1979 and 2000, which in the late 1990s became the subject of the Rampart scandal, which implicated widespread criminal activity within the unit, so it's no shocker Tenpenny, Pulaski and Hernandez belong to a unit of the same name. Tenpenny, and by extension his goons, are a satirical take on one of the largest cases of police corruption within the United States. Whatever this immoral rogue cop is up to, it's unlikely to have a benevolent endgame, and while he's in play, nobody is safe, least of all Carl. So naturally, this early into the game, no matter how promptly we whip Grove Street back into shape, it's false progress. There's more going on here for it to be that simple. But for now, I'll leave you in suspense, because I want to talk a bit about the immersion of Los Santos. On the topic of aesthetics, there's no denying the game has aged, quite considerably actually, but if we for a moment stop paying attention to the graphics themselves, you'll notice the game has a very distinct style. In fact, I'd go so far as to say it masterfully deploys its own technical limitations to enhance it. I like that draw distance only works so far, so everything behind it is obscured by the fog. It works sometimes better than others, but it creates a layered effect within the city. It makes the skyscrapers in the distance feel farther away than they actually are. This game's bread and butter is making you feel as if its map is far, far bigger than it actually is. And that's perhaps the most impressive thing about this game from a technical perspective. Beyond that, though, there's also a nostalgic element to San Andreas, not for the game itself, even though it is over 20 years old now, but in some ways for the era it's simulating. The story has a strong focus on the struggles of marginalized groups within American inner cities in the early 90s, so I don't think this yearning for the past is entirely intentional. But you see these amber streetlights? Inject them into my bloodstream. It's entirely understandable why they've been phased out of use today, but god, they're such vibes. As for other ways San Andreas fosters atmosphere, driving around is one of them. You see, as you're driving along, you can listen to radio stations. These range from talk shows spelling out the satire to listening to music. This game's musical assortment is incredible. There's enough variety for the radio stations to feel authentic, and yeah, for copyright reasons, that's probably as far as I can go with that point. Suffice to say, driving around in San Andreas is fun unto itself, which works out because you're going to be doing a hell of a lot of it. Also, as something of a side note, I miss when games couldn't be photorealistic. San Andreas is an example of that, meaning the game had to lean into an art style. Don't get me wrong, the progress of visuals and gaming escalating to the point they're at now isn't entirely negative. In fact, it's mostly positive. But there's something unique about an art direction born of technical limitations like this. I'm fond of the unnatural hues in the sky, and I love the visual effects deployed to make rainfall feel more volumetric than it perhaps is. It's like the rain creates a film grain effect. But atmosphere is created as much through the world you digest in passing as it is the activities you engage with. Stopping by the boozer for a game of pool is one such feature that you never have to engage with, but you can if you want to. This sort of benign activity goes a long way in making an open world feel alive. Unfortunately though, as a money-making method, it's a bit slow. Outside of the story, I decided to focus on getting my finances up as quickly as possible, both to see how quickly I could do it, and also to reap the benefits of never having to worry about the in-game economy again. So I tried my hand at a few arcadey odd jobs. Firstly, upon one of my early visits to a hospital, I found an ambulance and stole it, to discover that I could do paramedic missions, where I go around picking people up as they suffer from the profuse bleeding epidemic, and I'm paid to deposit them safely back at the hospital. I'm not entirely sure who's paying me to do this, but I suppose that's what ultimately makes it quite arcadey. You're on a timer because your patients are all bleeding out, and picking them up and dropping them off provides timer boosts. You have 3 seats free on your ambulance, and every level the number of patients that require picking up increases by 1. But also with every level completed, your pay increases. So while the levels do get longer if you can sustain it for long enough, it does become rather profitable. However, at the same time, it's also a really good way to accidentally aggravate police chases. So sometimes you've got to be incredibly quick, but you've also got to be incredibly careful not to hit or otherwise run over any cops. And then of course, because profits exist on a level multiplier, it takes a while to build that up. If helping out in the profuse bleeding pandemic of 1992 isn't for you, you can also nick a taxi and become a taxi driver, where you pick up fares hopefully before the ballers yank you out the car and then drop them off hoping that they give you a tip. But the tip is dependent on a series of factors. You need to be quick, you need to not crash, and sometimes a fare's destination is simply too far away for that to be attainable. So while it's slightly more immersive than the arcadey ambulance system because you know who's paying you, it's a slow and steady earner and it doesn't really tot up. If you nick a police car, you activate the Vigilante minigame, where your job is to drive around and kill people on a timer, so it's basically like the Dark Evil ambulance minigame. Pay incrementally increases, and again it's really unclear who's paying you to do all this. But my favourite of these minigames is the Firefighter, where you go around putting out fires. You'll find cars on fire in the road at various locations and your job is to spray it with water until it's out. And this will eventually escalate to spraying not just the car until it's out, but also the people who are also on fire inside it. Again, pay increases with the level, but I'd argue this minigame is more profitable than even the ambulance, provided you can keep the fire truck on its wheels.
Why is she made out of butter?
do 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 do.
There goes my hero.
Oh fuck.
If only there was someone we could call.
The minigames are fine, but if you want to make some serious Wonga, there has to be a better way of doing it, right? Well, as it turns out, there is. Gambling. Welcome to the magical land of inside track betting, or as I like to call it, the bookies. Here at the bookies, we can place bets on horse races. Via these blessed machines, we can bet on the horse with the lowest odds, and then proceed to watch it lose most of the time. But if you have enough cash from your time as a paramedic during the profuse bleeding epidemic, you'll learn that if you put down a consistent bet, the horse that loses most of the time will win enough to turn a profit. Come on, backdoor bandit! For Narnia! Yes! $15,000! So I spent an unhealthy amount of time sending it for the least likely horse. I admit I perhaps got a bit too into it. Come on!
Nah.
End! End! End here! Yeah! Stay in the lead, love truncheon. We did it!
1250 on crack horse. Go on, crack horse!
Crack horse!
Come on, lads!
No, crack horse!
Come on!
Come on!
Come on!
Oh! Oh! No!
Oh,
Crack horse!
crack horse!
Along with the occasional high, there were countless lows. Pillow biter might just do it. Oh! Occasionally, I'd nip over to a safe house to lock in my winnings and come straight back. Come on. Keep going, keep going, keep going. Yes! You know when you walk into a pub and there's that guy who's always hovering around the slots machine? Him.
Come on, crack horse!
Come on, crack horse! No! This is not
No!
what we asked you to do,
No!
crack horse! Come on, clown's pocket. I swear the race is always just long enough to be overtaken. Oh, yes. We are only ever so slightly better off than before. It occurred to me then that to make some serious profits, I'd need to up the ante. Peking Twister. Slap the 5 on Peking Twister. Oh, yes! 55 grand! Eventually, as I kept betting, I got bolder, in both senses of the pronunciation, I suppose, and before you know it, I was dropping insane sums on unlikely horses. There we go. $187,000 in my pocket. But as is typically the case with glimblers, I was not satisfied. I bought myself a mansion in the hills, not because it's a nice house to have, but it just so happened to be the closest safe house to the bookies. And then over the course of an overnight play session, I just did this. It's kind of pathetic. Nevertheless, the results speak for themselves.
It's 5 o'clock in the morning.
Well, honey, off to work. You've memorised the ranks.
What? To the bookies?
Yeah,
I don't know what you're talking about.
there's no waypoint.
I'm genuinely concerned Ethan is developing a gambling habit.
Yes!
No.
We did it again! Come on, keep it up, Billy Saster. Come on, we can win this. We can show these guys that to beat the bookies, you just have to keep going to the bookies. Come on! Come on! Come on! Where's the... No! 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 But hey, that's enough talking about the peculiar vicarious ways in which you can pick up a gambling problem. The time now, however, is upon us for me to show you how much this landed me. The answer is quite a bit. Will that affect the story in any way? No. Sweet stood here chatting about reuniting the families. Meanwhile, I've got enough money in my back pocket to go worldwide. I suppose I'll be keeping this plot-resolving windfall to myself. As for other content to get stuck into, provided your driving skill is high enough, you can go and partake in some racing at this stadium not far from the Johnson house. I gave it a few goes and came to the realization that it is incredibly difficult. The actual racing bit is reasonably straightforward. It's the stopping your car from blowing up part that I struggled with. I also find it funny that this organised event just let CJ in, as nobody questioned why one of the drivers is shooting at the others. Anyway, this is fun, and it's also got a great atmosphere. With a bit more practice, I reckon I could boss it. But I've got some serious criminal practices to be getting on with. For instance, burglaries. If you find one of these vans between the hours of 8 PM and 6 AM, you can use it to break into people's homes and steal their stuff. And that's kind of all there is to it. The other activity you can get up to, of course, is playing a multitude of arcade games. This is fun if you enjoy a bit of gaming with your gaming. It also, in a way, communicates directly with gamers, the consumers of this product, the era this game is set in. So I'm a big fan of that. Anyway, our time in Los Santos draws to its end. With the ballers supposedly weakened for plot reasons, the time has come for Sweet to reunite the families. A meeting that goes immediately awry when the police turn up. I wonder what that could mean. Big Smoke and Ryder dip, while CJ fights his way through a motel to rescue Sweet inside. Once we reach him, we escape. Big Smoke and Ryder magically appear again, and then we dip, fighting off coppers left, right and centre, feeling as if we're in the company of fellas who'd die for us. As the penultimate mission of our time here in Los Santos at the start of the game, it is fitting that we get this big moment of camaraderie between the four characters. Together we're proving the key point that Grove Street is far from done. Together we're fending off an army of police officers. If the police can't stop us, who can? It's an important question to ask, as the next mission absolutely gives us the answer. You see, the next mission is about putting the ballers to the sword once and for all. Sweet plans to ambush a group of ballers to bring the feud to an end. However, before we can get fired up and ride into battle with him, Caesar gives us a bell out of nowhere and asks us to meet him as soon as we can. What he shows us is truly alarming. Ryder and Big Smoke, along with the Green Sabre, the car used in the drive-by shooting that resulted in Carl's mother's death, some ballers, and Frank Tenpenny. It would seem they're all in cahoots. Ryder and Big Smoke have betrayed Grove Street to Tenpenny. It seems they arranged for the assassination of Sweet, and Carl's mother was collateral damage. As for Tenpenny, he's clearly neck-deep in crime. He's aligned with the ballers, but before we get any time to process that, we have to race to Sweet's location because it's almost certainly a trap. We arrive in a nick of time. Sweet is badly wounded, but he's still kicking. We fend off the ballers as best we can, but eventually the police sweep in and arrest us. Once again, the Grove Street families have been reduced to their knees. Except this time, the damage has been done from within. But we're not off to prison. No, Tenpenny has other plans for us. Sweet is imprisoned as a new blackmail chip. As for us, we're deposited by Tenpenny and Pulaski personally into the woods, where we're to continue to be his errand boy and hitman. It's here where we can finally process Big Smoke's betrayal. The plot doesn't do a great job at showing that CJ might care for Ryder's betrayal, and in my mind that's because Ryder's an asshole. From our first interaction, he's fairly hostile, but Big Smoke feigned friendship. You could tell that Carl and Big Smoke went way back, but now it's evident he's sold out the Grove. Tenpenny tells us that surely we know by now that loyalty and genuine camaraderie in this life is nonsense, a sentiment that now feels true despite only a matter of minutes ago feeling the farthest from the truth it could possibly be. We now find ourselves alone. The Grove Street families are no more. Sweet's in prison. Big Smoke and Ryder may as well start wearing purple. As for us, we're in the middle of nowhere, and Tenpenny is still breathing down our neck, threatening sweet safety if we don't comply. He sends us to kill an FBI informant to keep his own dirty business under wraps, which is simple enough and indicates that we're still under Tenpenny's control, technically. But in a way, the truth about Big Smoke and Ryder being in league with the Ballers and Tenpenny in the drug trade is liberating. They may have crushed our soul and undone all our hard work so far, aside of course from my gambling winnings, but whatever we build from here on out, we know who our enemies are. As for the wilderness surrounding Los Santos, it's an incredible environment. As far as its actual layout is concerned, it's a total nightmare to navigate, but its atmosphere has such great range. It can be refreshing and airy, but it's also spooky and eerie. The game's technical limitations combined with inclement weather and fog create surroundings that just feel inexplicably wrong. It is truly no surprise to me that a game from an era before YouTube, when the predominant gaming discussions online occurred on forums, with an atmosphere this densely disquieting in its less populated regions, would inspire the imagination so profoundly as to foster countless urban legends. San Andreas has tons of them, not all of them are focused here, but there's something so lonely and isolating about this region, when you're not on a road at least, that you just get this sneaky sense that something's out here with you. Even if that's absolutely not necessarily going to be true. But this feeling hits harder considering when you're introduced to this region in the story, when Carl is already isolated from everything he knows and loves, that it amplifies a natural skittishness within you. And this accidental petri dish for player-imagined urban legends almost certainly contributed to every Rockstar Games title since, aside from maybe Max Payne. But GTA 4, GTA 5, Bully, Red Dead Redemption, Undead Nightmare, Red Dead Redemption 2 each thrive off of snippets of a deeply uncanny atmosphere. And while this definitely crept in prior to San Andreas, this is where I personally believe it truly became prominent. Something that became an entirely intentional feature in later Rockstar games that proved to be one of my favourite things about them. Here it's merely potential, as proven by the countless urban legends. Nevertheless, this liminal vibe is absolutely one of my favourite things about San Andreas. Sadly, however, there's no Bigfoot to find. No deranged serial killer to track down, barring us of course. No ghosts or monsters. There aren't even animals out here, which probably doesn't help. So it is just a feeling, but what a feeling it is. As for what we actually end up doing out here in the sticks, aside of course from sweeping up every single property because I'm loaded, simply put, the plot continues. Once we've dealt with Tenpenny's problem, Caesar directs us towards his very interesting cousin Catalina, who, for lack of a nicer way to put it, is mental. This is a friendship Carl makes because, as the story puts it, he needs money. He's got to scrounge up enough for Sweet's bail or something, an impossible task. So with Catalina we carry out a series of robberies. These include robbing a tanker from a fuel station, being beaten to robbing a liquor store and having to chase down some hillbillies while riding God's most buoyant quad bike, robbing a bank because it's a classic, and robbing the bookies. Inefficient way to do it if you ask me, just send me in there with a fiver and a dream. I have to be honest, Catalina's missions all had one thing in common, and that's that I didn't enjoy any of them. While I could comment on Catalina's clearly compromised mental state, the problem is actually to do with the mission design. Across the game, the mission design is evidently archaic. The 3D era GTA games certainly bridge the gap between GTA games of modern times and the series' arcadey origins. If at any point during a mission you fail, you restart the entire thing. Not only that, if you die, you lose all your weapons, a bit of money, and respawn at a hospital. And if you fail on the fly, you don't go back to the start point, you just have to travel back there yourself. For the vast majority of the game, that's a welcome precedent. It's part of the challenge, but when you're in this rural-dominated landscape of dirt tracks and steep hills, you're going to find yourself doing an awful lot of driving. Within the mission, if you've attempted it before, you can typically skip that bit, but Catalina's missions allow you to choose which robberies you do in which order, so the game doesn't know where we're skipping the drive to, for one. Also, how roads weave through countryside is a lot harder to predict than how roads might weave through an urbanscape. So flying off the beaten path, putting vehicles on their roofs, or indeed flying very quickly back onto the beaten path and directly into an oncoming lorry are some of the hilariously inconvenient ways in which you can fail these missions at the absolute last hurdle. Maybe it's my own fault I dedicated too much time to breaking the in-game economy that I couldn't relate to Carl's need to team up with this utter lunatic, who tortures him by the way, but I still think I'd find these missions to be somewhat tedious, because they are. They exist in a narrative vacuum between one story beat and the next. In its stead, we get Catalina teetering between loving us and hating our guts. The missions aren't hard remotely, rather they're rooted in trial and error, so any error, and you're going to find yourself repeating an awful lot of driving, and then denounces her alleged love for us, binning us off for a fella named Claude, the protagonist of GTA 3, expecting us to be heartbroken like we don't see her shoot Claude in the mouth at the start of that game. Then, for the rest of the game, she'll call us at less than ideal times to brag about our failed relationship with her like our last relationship wasn't started with arson. We do get a garage in San Fierro out of beating Claude in a race, and that's kind of plot important. I'm just not sure the stalker was worth it. The next character we meet during our exile is the hippie named only The Truth, who appears to be supplying weed for tenpenny. We're to ensure this vast quantity of drugs are delivered, so The Truth, in his no doubt psychedelic enhanced wisdom, requests a combine harvester. So we have to go and nick one from a bunch of inbreds. Well, you know what they say, you can take the boy out of Devon. The Truth is an interesting conspiracy theorist character. He's very much so a satirical commentary in this respect. Being obviously stoned out of his bean most of the time, he's difficult to take seriously. He's an unlikely ally, but ultimately proves to be one when we help him burn his weed farm after Tenpenny tipped off the police and now it's being raided. The Truth is as loose an end as they get, and Tenpenny needs to tie those up. Either way, The Truth plays an important role in this story and Carl's journey. It's a demonstration that CJ can form relationships with people with entirely different lived experiences to his own. The distinction between Carl and Sweet over the vast majority of the story is the fact that CJ is adaptable. This is proven here. What makes it most important that it's explored here is we're liberated from Sweet's influence. Sweet would be apprehensive to trust anyone slightly different from him. Meanwhile, The Truth couldn't be further from Carl if he tried. He's a peace-loving hippie who cooks cannabis in the hills and drives a van called the Mothership. He has wild theories about the government's control over society. He clearly believes in aliens, I mean why wouldn't he, and claims that he travels via an astral goat. Like I said before, Carl's a straight man trope. He sees all the nonsense for what it is, but somewhere underneath The Truth's adult demeanour is a bit of truth. And Carl sees and values that. He's not going to let the traditional dogma of his upbringing prevent him from seizing an opportunity. That's further demonstrated in the other friendship we begin to foster in this part of the game. That, of course, is Woozy, the leader of the Mountain Cloud Boys Chinese crime syndicate, who offers to partner with us should we ever make our way to San Fierro. We meet him during an illegal street race, and it works out that during the next one we get a garage in San Fierro. I guess that's where we're going next. But the point I want to make first is this chapter, if you will, is dedicated to demonstrating how Carl responds to rock bottom. His brother is in prison and his two closest friends, if you will, are turncoats. In wake of that, he doesn't run away like he did when Brian died 5 years ago. He digs in and cracks on. He's somewhere unfamiliar, surrounded by unfamiliar people. If anything, his 5 years in Liberty City have aided him here. He is out of his comfort zone, but that's nothing new. He quickly establishes alliances, except this time he's doing so with intent on reclaiming his lost home. This is development within Carl's character that occurred before the events of San Andreas, but now his adaptability truly has the time to shine, because he has no choice. So in that respect, the line between exile and liberation is a fine one. The next chunk of the game takes us to the vibrant city of San Fierro. We arrive there at the end of the mission in which we burn the weed farm for The Truth. I don't think I necessarily got the atmospheric welcome as intended, as it was foggy as anything. Anyway, it's clearly based on the city of San Francisco. It's compact and steep, and of course there's an approximation of the iconic Golden Gate Bridge. But the main statement it makes is this 2004 game boasts multiple cities. That must have been quite impressive back in 2004. In fact, I'd argue it's still impressive now, considering that's not something GTA has ever done since. More importantly though, it's incredibly rewarding for your game progress to take you physically to new places, even if only to immediately purchase every available property there because I'm loaded. It's new scenery and a new atmosphere to soak in, a rejuvenating bonus. As we soak in the continuation of the story, we have a new environment to explore. A city that looks and feels vastly different to Los Santos. We have ourselves a nice little garage here. It's run down and it has to be said Carl is not pleased with it, but Kendall convinces him to transform it into a business opportunity. So to get this chop shop up and running, the truth immediately starts making returns. We embark on a little drive to pick up a couple of mechanics he knows, Dwayne and Jethro. Dwayne runs a hot dog van now, which explains why he still dresses like a mechanic, I suppose. And with those two recruits boxed off, there's one more stop to make, picking up Zero, a local tech nerd with a failing business who might be useful. Together we're going to transform this run-down garage into a thriving business, thus beginning our next chapter, becoming a businessman. Allow me to put on my business suit. The first business is to do with our new mechanical enterprise. To access it properly, we'll need to do the driving school, which is a series of unnecessarily particular advanced driving lessons. We're shown a demonstration, and then, after observing the demonstration, we've got to go and replicate it. Some of them are fairly straightforward. Others require a bit of trial and error to see it through. Then occasionally you'll be slapped with a challenge that is total agony. And you know what? I came to kind of like that. The repetition to getting it right. I didn't understand how at any point any of it would become actually useful. But you know what? It doesn't have to be, and I might as well like it, because it's going to get so much worse. Anyway, once the motoring cock and ball torture has been completed, we can purchase Wang Cars, the dealership across the street, and use it as a front for stealing cars and selling them on. In pristine condition, I promise. After a short chain of missions following purchasing the business, a glowing golden dollar sign will appear outside it, showing us that it's now generating passive income. As for other business ventures within San Fierro, there's valeting. But sadly it requires me to ditch my business suit. We're introduced to this business via Tenpenny, who asks us to plant drugs on a district attorney's car. The job is quite simple. You're timed to park cars without damaging them, and then eventually you'll be paid for the hell of it, if only real working worked like this. We can also help Zero by purchasing his hateful RC shop. We get an optional mission chain that, once we complete, turns his shop into an asset that generates income, and these missions are an ingenious form of torture. We've got to figure it out on the fly while we fly this clown's bastard plane. I couldn't figure out how this thing worked for the life of me. It worked on a control scheme partially independent from the controls I was getting used to. Our job is to fly across San Fierro and blow up couriers using this RC plane. We're timed in the form of fuel consumption, and at the same time we've got to figure out how to keep the thing airborne first. It took me a couple of goes, it has to be said, and towards the back end of my second attempt it started to feel a bit more natural. But even still, the thing felt borderline uncontrollable. In the end, rather than staying airborne, I decided to take out the couriers on the ground, but I did come away from this mission a bit baffled. That being said, it would all become clear by the end of the playthrough. Anyway, should you survive this round of Zero's hobby, there's another one. Except this time we're flying an RC helicopter across a miniature battlefield, clearing a path for Zero's RC car. And if you thought that plane was a pain in the backside, this is a different beast. We've got to figure out the Goblin helicopter's controls without too much direction, while listening to Zero bark vague orders using his nicknames for things rather than what you would expect those things to be called. As you can probably tell, I was very grateful that this content was optional. I found them to be highly disorienting, but if I attempted them after doing the flight school missions, I think I'd have an easier time of it. But even that I had to figure out a workaround to make work. All in good time though. For now, suffice to say, Zero's RC business can get in the bin. Another business opportunity is revealed to us as we progress through the story. At one point we discover the names Jezzy B, T-Bone Mendez and Mike Torino are the leaders of the Loco Syndicate operating out of San Fierro, supplying Big Smoke with crack. We decide to infiltrate the organization by offering our services to Jizzy, who, as it turns out, rather befitting of his name, is a pimp. And to earn his trust, he gives us his pimp mobile and sends us out pimping.
And watch the rims, player.
Watch the rims, player.
Our job here is quite simple: pick up and drop off women, particularly the women under Jizzy's enterprise, so that they can engage in fun cuddles with the public. And we do this while ensuring the women's safety, I suppose that's relative, and contending with other pimps. Oh, no, get back on your wheels!
Watch the rims, player.
I can't get back in the pimpmobile, it's about to blow up!
Watch the rims, player.
Anyway, success here is how we get in with Jizzy. But if you're left unattended with one of these bad boys, we can partake in the pimping minigame, where you do all of the things you were doing for Jizzy in that mission, albeit for yourself. Dropping off and picking up prostitutes, receiving a cut of the earnings, and after doing this 10 consecutive times, we'll pick up a perk where prostitutes will pay to engage with Carl rather than the other way around. So we become the prostitute's prostitute. I suppose that's fitting.
Business.
Anyway, these are the tools the game gives us to become a thriving businessman. It's appropriate then that the San Fierro portion of the game is also dedicated to Carl's network. We have Caesar, we have Kendall, we've got the mechanics, we've got the Truth, Zero, and of course, Woozy, whom we see transform from a business partner to a genuine friend. Constantly we're shown Carl befriending people with entirely different lives to his own. Caesar is the tip of the iceberg who showcases the contrast between CJ and Sweet. Back in Los Santos, Sweet was not keen on Kendall's new partner. He's now proven to have been blinded by gang rivalries and prejudice, because by this point in the story, Caesar has proven time and again to be one of CJ's closest and most loyal allies. Woozy follows suit. It's not hard to imagine that Sweet wouldn't be too keen on him either, but he's an invaluable business contact and source of information. The pair's friendship is robust and built on clear mutual respect from more or less the very beginning, cementing CJ's innate ability to value people vastly different to himself. And now we're starting to see that capability pay dividends. The audacity of our escapades is beginning to escalate. It pays to have friends in high places. It also pays to have friends in low places. And while we're at it, it pays to have friends in other dimensions. Carl's mentality is elevated by the people around him. Sweet was dedicated to the struggle to the point where it blinded him. As a result of going along with it, it blinded Carl as well. Now he's surrounded by characters who don't expect him to cling unflappably to a Grove Street first mentality. His brother isn't here to enforce the dogma. CJ is free to be CJ, and this is how he operates best. This isn't a man who freezes up at the first sight of change, he welcomes it, understanding its necessity. You get the sense that were this version of the character in charge of the Grove Street families, Big Smoke's betrayal wouldn't have happened. At the same time, it's easy to see how his talents are wasted there, how he would never be his brother. It's an observation that he's mindful of the needs of others, willing to help them if he can, whether it's Woozy fighting a Vietnamese gang, Kendall fending off disrespect from local San Fierro construction workers, the foreman of whom Carl buries alive in a portaloo, bit much, or Zero contending with a bully. CJ's open-mindedness, his compassion, his empathy allows him to get the most out of his allies, and while that allows him to build a statewide criminal empire, he's genuine and his care for his allies extends beyond their utility to him. There's no denying Sweet cared for his brothers in arms, but he was so blinded by an arbitrary street gang doctrine that he couldn't see how his strict adherence to an outdated code was harming them. It doesn't absolve Big Smoke nor Ryder's avarice. Not a lot in this story absolves Ryder, to be fair. But in showing Carl's understanding of his allies, we see that he's also beginning to understand his enemies. In short, his naivety is being cured. That in turn puts weight on the escalation and absurdity of the missions we undertake. Carl is becoming both more physically and mentally conditioned to ferociously navigate towards his goals. As such, taking on a major drug syndicate within San Fierro becomes feasible. As for our dynamic with Tenpenny's coercion, there's still an element of self-preservation to carrying out his requests, but it's no longer the ruling feeling. There's also a sense of keeping up appearances. Quietly, we're shifting from Tenpenny's grasp. We're still playing his game, but we're no longer a hapless puppet. Anyway, this chapter concludes with putting this drug smuggling ring to bed. We sneak into Jizzy's club, we counterproductively confront him for the sake of making a dramatic statement, then we kill his guys, chase him down and kill him. No more Jizzy. He jizzes no more. Then we head to Pier 69, nice, to crash the Syndicate's meet with the Ballers, with the aid of Caesar and Woozy. The gun battle we engage in here results in the death of T-Bone Mendez.
Mendez, I see you, Rifa motherfucker!
Leaving us to finally settle up with Ryder. I have to say, while I'm quite compelled by this game's story overall, one aspect that just simply wasn't compelling is Ryder. As an ally earlier in the game, I couldn't tell you one interesting thing about him. He just kinda thinks he's really smart and that's kind of him, and now, as an antagonist, he still exists in the shadow of Big Smoke. Don't get me wrong, it is a sizable shadow, but as I chased him down on a speedboat to kill him, I came to the realization that the story hadn't really spared him much thought. The guy doesn't even get as much as an exit conversation, we just blast him to smithereens along with his boat. And CJ doesn't have an emotional reaction to having to kill his childhood friend, which is really weird. Within the confines of the game it makes sense, as Ryder is never really portrayed as a friend. He's just kind of there, and now he's kind of there-ant. It feels like a missed opportunity. There could have been some form of meaningful exchange between the two characters here to make it feel more emotional. However, his death is unceremonious. Following this anticlimax, we next need to deal with Torino. We've got to fight our way onto a helipad, take a rocket launcher, and then shoot the guy out of the sky. Usually with a high-speed chase in between, basically. We don't verify that Torino was in fact on that helicopter, which is, in my opinion, a vital clue. But either way, our job in San Fierro, undoing the Syndicate supplying Big Smoke and Tenpenny with drugs, is done. One of the last missions of the chapter does try to give some emotional weight to CJ having to kill Ryder, but Caesar comes along to alleviate it by stating that Ryder tried to sleep with Kendall once. A very funny way to tack on a reason to make us care less about the guy. But before we can linger on how slapped on that is, we do have one last task in the city, to destroy the crack factory. We drive a car rigged with a bomb into the complex, fight our way through some goons, activate the explosive and then beat feet the hell out of there. Once the car's gone up and the factory with it, we make our daring escape and job's a good one. Overall, the San Fierro chapter does introduce us to a new environment that is distinct from Los Santos, which alleviates a big problem with portraying multiple cities in one game. If you don't make them distinct enough, they do start to feel like each other. It's marred only by its frustrating conclusion of Ryder's unsatisfying arc, but there's also a clear escalation in the craziness of the gameplay. It's more action-packed and blood-pumping. The concept behind CJ's feats are more absurd. The scope of what's possible feels significantly expanded, and it's done in a way that we, the player, feel as if we made that happen. Since that's what the storytelling is trying to communicate, that's what comes across. Furthermore, aside from being controlled by the player, we're starting to understand what it is about Carl Johnson that makes him special. His ability to connect with others and foster alliances. His forward-thinking entrepreneurial mentality. His adaptability to new environments is also well established by this point, and all of that is equipping him to better understand his situation, granting him clarity for his inevitable return to Los Santos to deal with Big Smoke and of course Tenpenny. Furthermore, he's now a thriving businessman. We're slowly but surely becoming equipped to make the resolution to this story absolute. But that's still a ways off yet. Before this story can come to its close, it has to get considerably more unhinged. Next up, we receive a mysterious phone call from a man using a voice modulator telling us to meet with him at a rural house in Tierra Rabada. Once here, quite obviously not the person who called us, instructs us to do a lap in a monster truck for some reason. So, sure enough, that's what we do. We're clearly being tested, though it's entirely unclear what for. Upon our successful completion of the task, we're asked to come back, where it's revealed our mysterious contract is Mike Torino, who, as it turns out, is still alive. I guess he must be immune to exploding helicopters. Either that or he wasn't in it. Either way, it also turns out he isn't in the drug trade for money, he's an undercover government agent. who tells us the police officer whose murder Tenpenny has used against Carl, threatening to frame him for murder, was actually killed under Tenpenny's orders, as that particular Rosa was going to report him to Internal Affairs, and now he's here to strike a deal with us. If we help him, he'll secure Sweet's release. So we end up pulling a few jobs for the guy, one of which is to go and purchase an abandoned airfield in the desert, where we must then complete a series of trials to learn to fly aircraft. It's like the driving school thing from before, except this one is entirely mandatory. As for how painful it is, well, to be honest, it's total agony. The controls are akin to flying Zero's RC plane, except we have to complete objectives with a degree of precision. And if there's one thing that mission didn't feel necessarily, it was precise. Now we've got to accomplish the one thing the system seemingly wasn't designed to enable. So, as you can imagine, this part of the game made me quite sweaty. I don't think it's genuinely hard, it's just cumbersome to get used to. The controls are somewhat clunky on PC, so I decided to switch to controller for specifically this, and that made my life 10 times easier. You still have to do all of it, and it can be a bit trial and error. The series of drills you have to complete before you can progress become increasingly precise. It's got to be punishing because it's preparing you for seemingly difficult flight-related missions, except the missions that follow it amusingly require nowhere near as much precision. In the mission that immediately follows, Torino sends us to do a stealth supply run. You've got 10 minutes to fly to the drop zone, and then fly all the way back, which is incredibly generous. Your only other parameter is that you've got to stay low as to avoid being caught on radar. Even that is made lenient with the visibility meter. I've seen people say that this is harder than flight school, but I genuinely disagree. Once you realise that keeping low is relative to how low you can go, I found it to be incredibly straightforward and did it on the first attempt. It requires nowhere near as much precision, and 10 minutes is a lot of time to cross a map that seems bigger than it is by air. So in reality it taps into very little of what makes flight school tricky, and the next mission taps into even less. Government agents have landed at the airstrip and we have to board their plane before it takes off, using a motorbike to catch up with it while it begins accelerating with its ramp lowered. The margin of error here is actually the hardest part of the mission. Once on board we have to fight some government agents using melee, steal a parachute, plant an explosive, and then dive out the plane's still open ramp, at which point we've passed the mission. The only part of flight school that is of course relevant is the skydive, but even if we fail miserably and die, the mission is still passed. Aside from deploying my chute way too early and having to watch Carl descend for ages, skydiving is an incredibly easy aspect of flight school. The more complex stuff, however, for instance doing a freehand helicopter bombing run, doesn't crop up ever, nor does needing to do a loop or a barrel roll. It's cool of the game to introduce us to these things, but there's no point in the remainder of the story where this stuff becomes mandatory, so I don't understand why, with how fiddly the flying controls can be at times, this is necessary to progress onto missions that don't need it. I suppose it's a degree of dummy treatment. We learn under harsher conditions here, so when we're actually flying along, it feels more as if it's easy because we've learned how to do it. The main takeaway isn't the fact that we have to do all 10 of flight school's drills to progress, it's the declaration from the game in adding this new dimension to the world, the sky. Missions from here on out can be bolder, more insane, and sure enough, that's embodied best by the mission The Truth sends us on. We have to infiltrate this game's equivalent to Area 51. Area 69, where Carl must steal a secret black project being worked on within. At first it seems a tad like an overwhelming objective. Sneak into a notoriously highly secure military base, slaughter more soldiers than one could possibly hope to count, remain in stealth by avoiding spotlights knowing that destroying more than 2 will result in a base lockdown, and then fight our way through the highly secure facility, while soaking in a fascinating environment where announcements over the tannoy imply the presence of alien technology. Back towards the start of this game, this mission would have been so ambitious that it would have felt impossible. You have 1 health bar, maybe you've come prepared and you've got some armor, but should you die, you're restarting the entire thing. You're navigating through a series of tight corridors and open battle arenas where the guards seemingly keep coming. CJ at this point is a one-man army. It's great because in a way we've conditioned him to be this, but we aren't done yet. Once we reach the heart of the base, we discover that the secret black project the Truth was yabbering on about is a jetpack that we then have to fly out of the facility and do our best not to get slapped with missiles. As you can imagine, flight school did not cover controlling these, but as it turns out, it's easier than any plane or helicopter. The main thing, however, is how on earth did we get from street crime to this? It's fundamentally ridiculous, and in fairness, it's precisely what you want. Big Smoke doesn't stand a chance. I can float now. This is part of a broader escalation that San Andreas handles incredibly well, and that is slowly but surely implementing things so the grounded early portion of the game and the total lunacy later on can coexist reasonably seamlessly. The concept of using jetpacks, stealing mysterious green goo, mopping the floor with military personnel, sometimes even using their own hardware, at first seems like a considerable few cuts above what this game is going for. Now we're doing it because, of course. Yes, the game is making commentaries on the erosion of communities during the crack epidemic and the corruption of street-level officials through Tenpenny, but GTA is also using the concept of America to satirize the West at large. The Truth, for instance, is a loony conspiracy theorist. He's portrayed as nuts, and in a way he kind of is, but at the same time, he's not entirely wrong about a deeply bureaucratic secret-keeping government. The Area 69 raid cuts both ways. In popular contemporary mythology, Area 51 is where the US government keeps the aliens, so going in here you don't know what to expect, and the tannoy is announcing that anyone stealing alien technology will not be invited on the next staff night out. It's a sizzling of expectations that the story might get wackier again. Instead, we find a jetpack, an insane innovation of technology, but by comparison to the expectation, also somewhat rather intentionally underwhelming. The game is mocking the absurdity around the mystique of Area 51, and of course how its secrecy has naturally enabled that. At the same time, it's poking fun at the conspiracy theorists who genuinely believe there are aliens there. But it goes further because the game is also now mocking itself. Sending Carl anywhere as a one-man army, regardless of his capabilities, is to treat him as expendable. Accomplishing this crazy feat is an acknowledgement of the one-man army game trope that it relies on, rather than hoping we don't notice, allowing the player to just enjoy it for what it is. In a way, Torino's convoluted government agent element to the story is the same, a commentary on how government intelligence agencies flaunt their own laws, often actively working against one another to further clandestine international interests. It mocks conspiracy theories once again. Simultaneously, it pokes fun at a highly fractured, self-defeating approach to national security. Trying to make sense of what we accomplish under Torino gets him, and questioning the activities we partake in themselves is intentionally a baffling web. Even if you could fashion some understanding of his objectives to buy drugs from Latin America, to fund proxy wars and then offloading those drugs in the US, Torino's motivations and how it's escalated to this is its own mystery. We are a grunt, a tool. It leads to some cool, action-packed missions, and that's frankly all we need to know. A spoof of portrayal and entertainment versus a jab at conspiracy theories, and then of course the muddy, confusing reality. It's a commentary on how people get lost in the big picture. Torino's philosophy is very much so ends justify the means, and if his end is to ensure a continuation of global political dominance, he's not going to care if that entails importing drugs into the country to ravage communities like CJ's that the state simply doesn't care for. In other words, this is the puppet master, or at least one of them, playing a game so advanced that even CJ is not equipped to deal with him. He carries out his duties without hard feelings nor remorse, and exists to represent a problem entirely caused by systems that ordinary people are powerless to stop. In a way, his high-octane missions are a reminder we're not out here to save the world. If anything, the Wild Torino saga renews the storytelling with focus. If Tenpenny's the small fish, this is the big fish. We can't put the problem right from the source, but we can go after those who turned on the community Carl represents. Big Smoke, and to a lesser extent maybe Tenpenny. a man sworn to protect a community he instead exploits. They may only be products of the actions of the likes of Torino, but this man is not emotionally attached to the story in any way. To him, the inner city of Los Santos is a sacrifice for the greater good, adhering to a value system ordinary people cannot relate to. Dedicating any time to taking him out of the picture would be a wasted effort. He'd merely be replaced, likely with somebody worse, because while he's still kicking, they're the second best option. It's a demonstration of the difference between moral bankruptcy and pure evil. Torino is morally bankrupt. He's a piece of a considerably larger bureaucratic puzzle that insulates him individually from the damage he does. As much as it's a flimsy excuse if we gauge everybody and everything's morality on the individual level, he's just doing his job. Tenpenny's corruption, however, is absolute. He's fueled by greed and pursues personal gain. He exhibits characteristics of cruelty and sadism. A top-to-bottom nasty piece of work. He might be just as manipulated by the likes of Torino as Big Smoke is manipulated by him, but the distinction between Tenpenny and the genuinely big fish is Torino isn't in this for personal gain. He's still a tiny cog in a massive machine where there's no room for the luxury of morality, a luxury Tenpenny can afford but consciously disregards. This allows the late game to be wacky, to explore how governmental overreach has transcended protecting actual people and instead defends ideologies, while also putting into perspective what it is precisely about Tenpenny that makes him such a bad man, and also what it is about Big Smoke's betrayal that makes it cut so deeply. Revelations that reduce both to reasonably pathetic figures necessitates a comprehension of the bigger picture. Tenpenny's occasional popping up to make Carl do odd jobs for him suddenly makes sense. He's deeply paranoid of the feds and by extension Torino, their capacity to blow him and his criminal empire away like a leaf in the wind. He's frantically playing a game of whack-a-mole with loose ends, sending us to eliminate informants, preventing evidence falling into the hands of the powers that be. Once our utility is expired, he attempts to do the same with us. He turns on Hernandez to tighten the circle again, and then instead of killing us himself, orders Pulaski to do it, exposing one of the series' most evil, reprehensible villains for the coward that he is. Of course, this plan backfires and results in Pulaski's death, leaving Tenpenny far more isolated than Carl ever was. This is important because early game Tenpenny is a symbol of fear, an untouchable tyrant who dominated life on the streets in Los Santos. Now, Carl is fully equipped to no longer be afraid, and it's been facilitated entirely through the game's escalation. But it's not just the storytelling that facilitates this success, it's also the setting of these chapters. The desert surrounding Area 69 is obviously inspired by the Mojave Desert straddling the border between California and Nevada, a place with a naturally eerie atmosphere. It's a dry, vastly depopulated region where, much like the wilderness surrounding Los Santos, things just don't quite feel right. Here, however, I get the feeling there's a tad more intention to that. It's worth remembering the mystique around Area 51 was potent. As such, Area 69 has a similar looming presence. The idea behind this backdrop is we are a stone's throw from secrets that could transform our perception of reality itself, secrets the government is keeping from the people. That makes it an incredibly fitting environment for the chaotic Black Ops Torino missions, one where they could lead us to anything. This ominous, desolate expanse hits a sweet spot where the blank canvas and the human imagination unchecked can truly meet. Once again, I don't have a hard time believing such an environment dominated by ancient stone structures and lonely minimal signs of human habitation paired with this unnatural purple nighttime haze could lead to a slew in urban legends during a time before games could top to bottom be documented online. But the desert isn't all we have to take in. We also have the city of Las Venturas, based of course on Las Vegas, Nevada, a gambler's paradise, an urbanscape neon-soaked in the illusion of easy money, where Woozy loops Carl in as a business partner for his new casino. Business is touch and go with the looming presence of the mafia families from Liberty City. So, long story short, Carl ends up helping his business friend, getting to the bottom of what's going on and fending off the mob, even going so far as planning and executing a heist on their casino in return for a stake in the ethically dubious, albeit legitimate business. At the same time, with Woozy's blessing, Carl plays both sides a bit. He befriends a couple of English fellas, Kent Paul, voiced by Danny Dyer, and Macca, a horny chap from Salford.
Here we are. Look familiar?
Looks just like Salford to me.
Paul's old friend, Ken Rosenberg, is the manager of Caligula's casino, so we end up assisting him with bits and bats here and there to earn the mob's trust. His position is that of one chosen to keep the peace between the three mafia families. So when our meddling no doubt partially contributes to the resulting all-out mob war, Ken Rosenberg and our new English friends' lives hang in the balance when Salvatore Leone is allured to Las Venturas. Using a prior connection from his time in Liberty City, the mob boss's son, CJ offers Leone his services, carrying out a couple of assassinations on behalf of the man. First, skydiving onto an airborne plane to take out hitmen sent to kill Leone, and then flying to Liberty City to assassinate a rival mob boss. This allows him to ensure the safety of his new Anglo friends Paul and Macca, as well as Rosenberg, all while successfully infiltrating Leone's operations to pull off an inside job on Caligula's, securing Woozy and his own business interests in Las Venturas. This is the turning point in CJ's character arc. Back in Los Santos, he was the manipulated, now he's the manipulator. He's gone from merely surviving to thriving, runs multiple successful businesses, and is confident in himself to face nationwide criminal organizations such as the mob, proving that he's now ready to make his grand return to Los Santos and reclaim his home. And all he needs is the perfect opportunity, which comes in the form of Mad Dog, the now disgraced rapper whose life CJ ruined earlier in the story. We killed his manager and stole his rhyme book on behalf of OG Loke, and now we must actively put that wrong right, throwing Mad Dog a lifeline, assuming the role of his new manager, and returning home to Los Santos with the assistance of the Triad to reclaim the life we took from him, setting us up for the narrative's conclusion. But before we skip along to talk about that, there are a few blank spots I'm yet to cover in this quite lengthy piece. I haven't mentioned the combat gameplay yet because I don't really know how to implement it, considering the game's focus on escalation. Now in Las Venturas it's entirely escalated, but yes, I still don't have a lot to say about it. The shooting works, there's no real sense of impact though. Mission structure places emphasis on preparation, so you'll want to load up on armor and weaponry before your next mission, or if you die, before restarting a mission, which can be quite a fuss. So my preference is to bang on a save nearby to the mission start to prevent a hassle. As for the police response, like any GTA game, your wanted level is dictated by your star rating. If your star rating is 2 or above, the only way to really lose it is to either visit a pay and spray or save somewhere. There's no real mission that necessitates it to go very high, but if you continuously rack it up, you'll find yourself facing increasingly advanced resistance. As for the actual mission structure, I have spoken about how dying resulting in you having to restart the entire mission can be somewhat limiting, but is actually kind of a charm of a game of this vintage. But what I haven't mentioned is how impressive for 2004 this game's variety of activities is. I think it's a reasonable criticism to level at more modern Rockstar games that their mission structure overall is predictable in its setup and handholdy to the point of ease. However, place one foot where the game doesn't want you to and you can fail. There has become a notable lack of room for player creativity, and there are signs of that in San Andreas, but I've always been impressed in Rockstar games new and old at the variety of activities within the missions themselves. Sure, there's a lot of driving, but beyond that, there's a constant flow of throwaway one-off mechanics, which I've always viewed to be a positive thing within itself, while in more recent years it's become increasingly obvious it's a plaster for that distinct lack of player agency. I stand by my belief that it is a bloody good plaster. A plaster nonetheless it was here, never mind more recent titles, but one that I find is bloody competent at keeping my pea-brain engaged. Now, were we talking about a far more modern Rockstar game, I'd fixate more on the mission structure's more limiting nature and how that's a problem, but this is a game from 2004 that plays like a game from 2004. Here its variety of parameters and in some instances one-off mechanics solely elevates the experience rather than also being a symptom of what ails it. Another thing I've mentioned in passing but haven't spoken about at length is this game's sense of progression. We've explored how that's delivered in the story, with the expansion of the map introducing us to new locations, creating this sense of a journey that the game is trying to incorporate, and does so wonderfully. But also in gameplay, as I have alluded to, there are stats that we can consciously work on improving. For instance, if you go to the gym, you can improve Carl's stamina and Carl's muscle mass, and you have to balance that against fat, but that's only part of it. We can also improve Carl's lung capacity by swimming underwater. In fact, we'll have to during the San Fierro portion of the game. Then of course we have driving skill, riding skill, flying skill, and a boat skill. Improving these skills naturally make the handling characteristics of the vehicles encompassed by it more forgiving. This definitely makes your life easier as the missions become increasingly insane. The weapon skill functions in a similar way. We can become more proficient with certain firearms. In doing so, CJ's abilities with that particular weapon will be greatly enhanced, marking a clear difference between Carl's abilities early in the game and later on. With some exceptions, these aren't things you have to go out of your way to enhance, rather, it occurs naturally as you simply play the game. This allows improvement to be subtle or even unnoticed. Nevertheless, you notice certain things getting easier. If you do a lot of riding motorbikes, you'll notice you don't get knocked off as easily. If you do a lot of driving, you'll note the car doesn't take as much damage, and when it comes to combat, what seems like an impossible feat at the start of the game, by the end is Tuesday. San Andreas overall has a wonderful sense of progression that permeates through the entire game. Everything we do feels as if it's contributing to expanding the scope of the experience, whether we're honing our skills with particular vehicles, particular weapons, or indeed developing our fashion sense. We could be contributing to a business that ends up turning around passive income, or progressing in the story unlocking new regions, which is broken down in a way that makes this reasonably small world feel massive. It might still be a product of its time, but there's just so much masterfully interacting in this game. There's a lot of content to sift through in passing, endless enterable interiors. There are mini games that range from gambling to gaming, but best of all is the fact that the world is trying to interact with you too. In passing, NPCs may comment on you, leaving you with 3 options: to respond either negatively or positively, or simply not respond at all. The nature of these interactions is dependent on your fashion sense, among other factors, and that helps make even this aging world feel alive. If you carjack someone, there's every chance they're not going to sit down and take it, and might even try to steal the car right back. If you aggravate an NPC, they might even try to fight you. Even today, with all its limitations on full display, I'm convinced by this virtual world. And with all that covered, let's go home. With the backing of the Triad, and by that I mean Woozy, CJ, Kendall, Caesar, and Mad Dog return to Los Santos. But it's not like the last time. Now we know who our friends are and who our foes are. We are no longer a street-minded grunt, but a successful businessman, a veteran of the criminal underworld. But that doesn't mean the task ahead of us is going to be easy. First, we reclaim Mad Dog's mansion. With the Triad at our back, this is a doddle. We battle through the compound and secure it as our base of operations. We get Mad Dog back up and running with the aid of Paul and Maka, at which point Torino sends us on his craziest, most piss-taking mission yet, to sneak on board an aircraft carrier docked in San Fierro and steal a VTOL fighter jet, with which we must destroy a series of spy ships. This is the breaking point for the game's absurdity, and the game knows it more than anyone, so it concludes with Carl telling Torino to shove it, after which point he has Sweet released. Sweet proves at this point to be a difficult man to please. While CJ has fought across the state, his brother still sees him as having abandoned the gang, the Grove Street families. He's still very much so stuck in an ideology that hasn't served him, and unwilling to accept that Carl's way works. Sweet thinks CJ's abandoning the philosophy of the life they should be living, looking out for their neighborhood, their community, And in a way, he's not entirely wrong, but CJ had no choice. There's also a power imbalance between the two characters now. Carl's been fostering connections, making money, founding businesses, leveling himself up in every single way, whereas Sweet has been languishing in prison. He's a fish out of water who just wants to go home. So I understand his desire to return to Grove Street when CJ doesn't necessarily see the tactical value in that. Sweet's mentality is a product of his narrow-mindedness, but now CJ's mind is entirely open. With the strength and firepower we now boast, having someone with us reminding us to not forget where we came from can be an asset. We've achieved a lot. We could easily forget about Big Smoke, focus on the future. But we haven't finished what we started. Returning to Grove Street to see it in total disarray is part of that, an essential part even. It's now ravaged by the drugs Sweet kept out. As such, we need to kill any crack dealers we see. Then we fend off the ballers and take the hood back. But that's not the end of our woes here. The next time we see Sweet, he's on the cusp of becoming a statistic in the crack epidemic himself. His gang is gone and his streets have fallen to the horrible substance. His values have led him to this moment and now he wavers. That's got to do some heavy lifting in the department of breaking a man. No matter, Carl arrives just in time to stop him. So, instead we continue taking the fight to the ballers, taking back territory. Regardless of how much of this you did way earlier, you'll have to do it all now, to a point. And then we take on a fella named B-Dub, a former associate of the gang who turned to the ballers because he was more concerned with profiting off the crack epidemic than stopping it from entering the city. He tries to unleash his slave Big Bear on us, who was a former member of the Grove Street families, until he got hooked on the drug and it eroded away his dignity, but now he takes it back, fighting against his employer's mistreatment. Even after years of being ravaged by the horrendous drug, this man regains control, demonstrating to Sweet that all is not lost. From here our objectives simplify. Next we help Mad Dog in reclaiming his life from OG Loke, the life we helped take. Even though Mad Dog's use to us is reasonably limited, this is a wrong we have to put right. After all, it's our fault. We helped the Loke steal his rhyme book, kill his manager, kill his guards, and as it turns out, Loke has a record contract with Big Smoke, through whom he launders his drug money. He chose the wrong side, and now the life he stole is being taken from him. It's a moment of justice, and a symbol of CJ recognizing and putting right his mistakes, demonstrating he has the capacity to bring it full circle. This is important because after this point, the time is upon us to gather our allies and take the fight to the streets. Tenpenny's been investigated for his crimes the whole time, but thanks to our meddling under his thumb, there's no evidence to prosecute him. As such, he's released. The result is full-blown riots in the inner city of LS, transforming the city into a battlefield. This part of the game is rooted in a very real event, the 1992 LA riots, which kicked off after 4 police officers were videotaped using excessive force on a fellow named Rodney King, and a jury acquitted them. Here in San Andreas, the reason for the rioting is more simplified. Tenpenny's getting away with his crimes, and people have had enough. The chaos proves to be a golden opportunity to retake the streets from the ballers, help Caesar retake his turf, and once we've done enough of that, with the golden number being 35% of controlled territory, the time will finally be upon us to come face to face with Big Smoke. To find him, we'll need to fight our way through his crack palace. It's a miserable building that very much shows the depravity of those who profit off of this epidemic. It's a series of floors we have to fight our way through. For the most part, it's a series of unwelcoming, grimy rooms and corridors. More than anything homely, it's heavily fortified. A structure of paranoia that perhaps implies Big Smoke knew we'd get this far. Manned with an army of minions, the Crack Palace is a monument to Big Smoke's desperation, a place where the value of human life is entirely forgotten. But of course, none of that matters when we come face to face with him. He may be wearing body armor, but he's sat on his couch playing a game. His tone is surprisingly relaxed, almost accepting. He knew we'd come. When he turns to face us, he stands by his actions. He claims he doesn't regret a thing.
Smoke, you had made it, CJ. I'm a success. I can't be touched!
Then we have to fight him and his baller friends. Typical of a boss fight, we have to shoot him a lot. All those number 9s function as extra body armor, I suppose, but eventually he will go down. In his final moments, Carl gets the opportunity to talk with his friend and ask him why he betrayed the Grove Street families. Smoke admits he was corrupted by money and power unattainable to him under Sweet. As it turns out, he does regret the way things went, but he dies clutching a wad of cash, symbolic of his point of view that it was his only choice. He wanted to matter, he wanted to be remembered, and in a twisted way he got his wish. Sweet's stagnant mentality had no regard for what he wanted, so he looked elsewhere. It's easier to condemn if it wasn't so obvious the man was desperate to matter. But before we can grieve the passing of an old friend, the opportunity comes along. The real villain of this story, the master manipulator Tenpenny, now exposed for the pathetic, paranoid coward that he is looking to flee from Los Santos with a suitcase full of money. At least he's come to us and saved us the hassle. He's no longer a threatening figure, nor is he one worthy of our pity. Not like Big Smoke. He's just a horrible man with nobody in his corner, looking to run away. And fortunately, now we get the opportunity to stop him. He sets fire to the building and now we'll have to fight our way through the blaze. Then once this last-ditch attempt at suffering on the game's part is over, we'll have to chase him with our brother Sweet while he drives away in a fire engine. It's a fitting end for the looming presence of terror who's haunted us the entire game. Suddenly, we are that for him. We relentlessly chase him through the streets of the city, forcing him to go towards Grove Street, fending off any grunt backup he sends our way. By the time this chase is over, he truly is alone. Then he loses control of the truck and sends it off a bridge, landing in Grove Street. The crash leaves him mortally wounded, desperately calling for help, giving him just enough time to realize nobody is coming to save him. In his final moments, he shows no remorse for his crimes, even implying that he believes his actions were justified, but there's nobody left to reason with. Nobody's listening. He dies alone, afraid, in the epicenter of the territory of those he spent his entire career terrorizing, and nobody even had to shoot him. A fitting way to go if ever I've seen one, and a fantastic capstone to a great story, Carl's journey, that took him across the state to foster allies and means for this very moment. Now that it's been and passed, what comes next for the characters is up to them. And thanks to Carl, Kendall and Caesar's entrepreneurial spirit, the possibilities reach far beyond the horizon. As for Sweet, thanks to him, we still have a home, Grove Street. As for the truth, I guess we have a jetpack too. Cheers, buddy. Now all that remains is to reflect on the insane journey we've been on and the friends we made along the way. Not to mention the peace we restored to the streets in the process. We get one last cutscene showing us this is the beginning of the character's ventures in business, committed now as a family. And despite his power and wealth, nobody's more committed to that future than Carl himself. To conclude this video that has frankly been too long, I acknowledge that, GTA San Andreas is a fantastic game even in 2026, but that's no surprise. It might be outdated in the visual and gameplay departments, but the main thing it carries over is a potent narrative that finds its way into every aspect of the game. Everything contributes towards its ending. In big and small ways, every aspect of the game works its way in to make the finale feel earned. To top it all off, Carl Johnson is a fantastic protagonist. You see the lessons he learns when he learns them, and how he uses those lessons to his advantage. You see his open-mindedness, how he makes allies, and how he's never too stubborn to try something new. You see how he engages with the world as a human being and how the world engages with him in return. As for the other characters, they're great mostly as well. Big Smoke is a tragic villain, you can understand where he's coming from. Tenpenny is an irredeemable evil antagonist and owns it fully. Every character in this game owns their role. Whether we're talking about the Truth's loony theories, OG Loke's hilarious posing, Macca's horniness, maybe not Ryder, but never mind. You get the idea. San Andreas takes us on a journey across a sprawling state of deserts and forests, cities, and more cities. The variety of the environments combined with their story delivery helps make this game feel far more expansive than maybe it is. exposing us to a world that feels convincing and alive, that interacts with us back, full of enterable interiors, complete with a variety of activities for us to get lost in for hours on end. It's also an atmospheric masterclass, though I'm not entirely sure it was intended to be one, and if it was, it wasn't in the ways that I found its atmosphere to be most potent. Grand Theft Auto San Andreas has been a superb treat to sit down and play through, properly for the first time ever. While I've played my fair share of bits and bats in the past, I'd never done a full playthrough. To say I've finally done it has been worth every second, worth the struggles of flight school, the awkward controls of flying Zero's RC plane, the idiosyncrasies of the arcadey mission structure. And you know what, I enjoyed myself so much I'd do it all again. Sure, the gameplay is no longer cutting edge, the graphics most certainly are not, but you know what, while I was there having a blast, that didn't really occur to me. And to me, that's one of the many ways that a game can be great. It doesn't have to age with grace, it just has to be unapologetically itself, and that's San Andreas down to a T. And with that, I bring this video to its conclusion. I'd like to thank you all for watching. I really hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, be sure to go ahead, leave a like, subscribe, share the channel with your friends, all that wonderful stuff. It would be massively appreciated. And if you fancy joining our modest Discord server, be sure to follow the QR code on screen now. If you can put up with over 90 minutes of my ramblings, then you are more than welcome. As for what I'm going to do next, I think I need to work on a video that's at least less than an hour long. But whatever that is, with any luck, I'll be seeing you all very soon with another video at some point. But until next time, please take care, and goodbye.